In a moment, I'm going to show you a few techniques to make a hypothermia wrap. A hypothermia wrap, better known as a burrito, is a really good technique for one, getting people back from being hypothermic, but also if someone's in shock, if someone's uncomfortable, if someone's cold, this is a great technique to use to warm them up really quickly. In addition to that, this technique provides a lot of protection from the elements, so you can keep wind and rain and all sorts of things like that off of your patient. As long as you follow the following principles, will create a good hypothermia wrap. So the first one is you want to make sure that the patient is insulated from the ground, because a lot of the body heat gets sucked into the ground. Second thing is you want to make sure that they are protected from the environment. So if it starts raining all of a sudden, they're not going to get wet. And if it starts getting really windy, they're not going to get chilly. If there is any rain to come down or any water, you want to make sure that the water beads off of the wrap and not going into the wrap. And fourthly, you want to make sure that you have access to the patient inside the burrito fairly easily. We talk a lot about hypothermia wraps and burrito wraps when we talk about treating for shock. And the reason for that is because it'll maintain warmth and provide comfort for your patient. In order to do a successful burrito, you need 3 basic components. A sleeping bag of some kind. You'll also need some kind of tarp. The bigger the better. And lastly, you'll need some kind of underpad. First thing you're going to do is take your tarp and lay it out. Once you have your tarp laid out, you're going to take your underpad or your insulating layer and you're going to put it on top of the tarp. Now you can see here that I've put this underpad near the middle, and the reason for that is that eventually I'm going to start folding in the different sheets, and so I want to have space on both ends, on the top and the bottom as well, if you can. Next thing, you're going to take your sleeping bag and lay that on top of your underpad. With a patient who can walk in themselves, you're just going to basically open up the sleeping bag, ask them to crawl in, and then zip it back up. At this stage, we oftentimes get questions about boots. Do you bring the boots inside? Do you leave the boots outside? Especially if it's snowy or muddy, and especially in the cold weather, boots are often a very good insulator. And so the question of, do you remove the boots to put them inside the sleeping bag? And my go-to answer is this. You want to make sure that there's no moisture inside the burrito, because that moisture can get cold and that can keep the patient colder. So if you can remove the liner from the boot, I would remove the liner, keep the liner on the foot, but keep the actual wet part of the boot outside of this burrito. If you can't remove the liner, like it doesn't remove, like it's just one item, I typically would suggest taking off the boots, but then putting warm things near the bottom of the feet, just to make sure that you don't introduce moisture inside this burrito. So now that the person is inside the sleeping bag on top of the underpad, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start wrapping them up. When I get to the feet, typically what I like to do is I like to take the tarp and just tuck it underneath the feet, so that if it were to rain over here, all this rain would now beat off the sides and down the back. If I were, on the other hand, to fold it upwards, now I'm introducing a spot where rain could potentially get into the burrito. So again, I take this little extra bit and I flip it underneath the patient. Now my footbed is entirely waterproof. By having some extra flap near the top of the head as well, if it starts to get a little bit rainy, I can always take this and put it over top of my patient to provide a little bit of a barrier from the rain. You want to make sure that you still have access to their airways, make sure that their breathing is fine. So in order to do that, I typically just have a little bit extra over here, but I don't put this on top of the patient on a regular basis. For the head, I'll typically just roll up the tarp to kind of create a little bit of a mane around their face.